Hello everyone, welcome to the City's Digital Consulting webinar on customizing your Laserfiche forms. Today we're going to talk about one of the best ways that you can increase user adoption as well as make your forms look customized and professional. And the easiest way to do that a lot of times is to customize the way that users will see and interact with the fields that you're trying to display on your form. My name is Jessica Welsh. I'm the Director of Consulting here at Cities Digital. This presentation was made in collaboration with Rob McCluskey, who's one of our system architects here. He's an absolute forms guru, so credit to him. And what we're going to do today is go through some of the out-of-the-box, really easy functionality. We're going to proceed from kind of the easiest point-and-click configurations and then get into some of our more advanced ones. This is not everything you can do to customize your forms, but these are really some of our collated, most popular types of customizations that people ask for. If you'd like more information about customizations or you have specific questions, you can definitely feel free to post them into the question and answer, and I can get to that at the end. Or feel free to email us afterward, and we can address your question specifically after the webinar. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. First thing I want to talk about with Laserfiche forms is the themes. So themes allow you to customize your look and feel of the form, including things like colors, things like layout, and you can make it match your company or organization's logo colors or your existing website colors. And if you want to take it a little step beyond what's available just right in the viewer for point and click configuration, you can use themes with your CSS that you may already have in place as well. So for right now, I'm going to go through a couple of our tips on themes. I'm not going to go through everything in the themes tab, but we'll look at what's in there. So when you're in Laserfiche forms and you want to adjust the theme on one of your forms, what you will do is click on the themes tab in your viewer window. So that is, aside from the layout where you put in the fields, it's the themes tab that's a little bit further over on the tabs on the top. If we zoom in a little bit here, we can see all of our different point and click options for customizing our theme. So there are some out of the box ones, but for today, since we're talking about forms customization, we'll talk about some of our customized options. So you can definitely upload your own logo or an image for the form. You can customize the whole background of the form if you don't want it to be just white. You can do title, description. These are all just colors and text. And then you can do section labels if you want those to be a different color to kind of call them out a little more. If you want the fields to look a certain way, you can do that as well, customize that in description. Some of the things that people haven't used as much, but people really like, is you can add tooltips to some of your forms if you want. And then you can also customize how the buttons look so that they can look like they're part of your organization's theme as well. So you can click on any of these and it will show you a properties window. And then once you get your form customized how you would like the look and feel, what you can do is you can actually add that set of settings to your custom themes so that it becomes one of the just selections that you can use on the preloaded themes section. So it makes it really easy to apply all these customizations to all of your forms processes that it should be applied to. Next, I want to talk about how you can make the colors in your theme look just how you would like them to. So Laserfiche tries to make it really easy for those of you who aren't familiar with web colors or any kind of HTML or programming to pick out the colors for your theme. So when you click on, for instance, the background of your form title, you can use a color picker to pick the exact color that you want for your form. So if you don't know this little code here, which is the web color, if you don't know that code, you can just slide your mouse around on the color picker until you get the color exactly how you want it. If you can't find quite the right color using the color picker here, I'm going to show you how you can add a simple web extension to your web browser so that you can pick with an eyedropper, you can pick any color on your existing website or some other website or any kind of resource that you have on the web so that you can get your web color to really get the exact color that you're looking for. I know there are other ways to use this, but if you're not super technical or you don't feel comfortable inspecting a page, this is another way to do it. So you can use an eyedropper tool that can be added as an extension to your browser. In our example here, this is a Chrome browser, and we've just added an extension, which you can do right through the menus in your browser. And it's just a very simple, small download that adds this little color dropper to right after the address bar in your Chrome browser. And then when you click on that eyedropper button, it pops up a little eyedropper, and anything you click on a web page, it will show you what color it is that you clicked on. And it will pop up this little window, and it will show you the palette for your whole website, as well as here's the color that we selected. From here, if we would like to put that color into our forms theme, all we have to do is copy this web color and paste it in. Then we're not even one single little bit off of what color we wanted, and we have consistency from our website to our Laserfiche forms. It really ties everything together nicely and makes our forms look really professional, and yet it was pretty quick and easy to do. So you can do that for any place on your website. So that can include your header, the color of any of the heading text that you have. You can even do it for hyperlinks. So you have one color for your hyperlinks when they're clicked, one when they're not. You can even grab those colors as well using this eyedropper tool. This is a really handy extension to have for anybody who uses any kind of web colors or needs to maintain color consistency across different products. This can even be used if you're customizing colors with WebLink, which is a little outside of the scope of this discussion, but it's another place you could use this web extension. Another thing that we talk about that's really, really popular with forms is pagination. So a lot of you out there have forms that maybe were previously multiple paper pages, or they're just a really lot of fields for somebody to try to look through. And when we start switching over from paper forms or a really long web form to Laserfiche forms, we have some options to break up those fields of information into smaller, more digestible chunks. This makes the end user experience a lot easier and helps reduce errors within their data entry. So making the interface simple and easy to understand is definitely one of our forms best practices and our goals with customization. So in one of the later versions of Laserfiche forms, I believe 10.2 and later, you have the ability to add pagination very simply. So we're going to look at what some of the different options are for adding pagination to your forms. So first of all, how do you add pagination and how do you see if you have it available? So within your Layout tab in Laserfiche Forms, if you look at the bottom of the fields list, you'll see a page break. So it's down below by the custom HTML. And if you insert page breaks, you just drag them over onto your form designer, just like you would any field. In between the two fields you want to break into separate pages. Then you can go to the pagination area and you can click on which style you would like. So out of the box there are 4 different styles: navigation tabs, which looks like tabs at the top of your page. You have the drop down, progress bar, or none. You can include buttons to allow your users to easily be able to navigate between the different sections or different pages of their form. And if you wanted to, once you save the forms, you can remove those page breaks. So pagination is really great for the users who are entering that information, but when you go to store the document in Laserfiche, it's easier to see it all in a big list so that, because you're not doing the data entry, so that you can see everything that someone has entered. You have some really nice customization options for pagination as well out of the box. You can change the name of the pages that you have from their defaults, which would be the section title right here. You can also customize the name of the previous and next buttons. So if you wanted to say go to the next page or continue versus go back, you can change previous and next to whatever words maybe match any other processes that you have built out, or just your company or organization style. So what I want to do next is just kind of go through and show you what each of the pagination items looks like. So here is one of we're using the student accident claim form for an example today. So what we have is the first page just collects basic student information. You can see this one is separating out our pages by tabs. So across the top here we have our different tabs. You can't see it in the screenshot, but we're also using the previous and next buttons. So after somebody got through all of the fields on this page, they would just click next at the bottom to go to injury details and then insurance information after that. And then at the last tab, that's where the submit button is, so that they're able to send their form in. The other option, this is one that's really useful, especially if you have a really long form with a lot of pages, is a progress bar. So this will give people some hope of when their form is going to be completed after they get through each tab. So this one is just showing at the top which section of the form you're on, student information, and then how far along you are in the process. And then this bar gets filled up further the further you go along. So you can see we're on page 1 of 3. At the bottom we still have our navigation buttons that say next and previous. When we get through all the fields on this form, we could just click next to go to the next one, and our progress bar will proceed to the next page. The next one is the drop down. So this might be if you have different options in your form that may not be required. So if you have optional ones, people maybe hop back and forth or just go to the direct one that they would like or that they choose. Then they could have a drop down at the top and they can choose which one they would want to fill out. Same thing though, still have the navigation buttons at the bottom. So here's what the navigation buttons look like when you get to the bottom of the form. We did not customize the language in ours, so it just says previous and next, but this could be easily customized with colors from your theme, as well as text that makes sense to you and your users. All right, there's some other customizations that are available fairly easily that are super popular from our users. So we're going to look at some of those. These ones are really useful in enhancing the user experience by being able to do automatically things that they used to have to do previously. You can also, another thing that we're going to talk about is what happens at the end of the form. So a user submits it, and then what happens? How can we display something that's relevant to users at the end of their submission or tells them what the next steps are versus just the generic thank you page? So that's what we're going to go through in this section. First thing that we hear a lot of times when people are designing new Laserfiche forms is, how can I do a calculation? A lot of times the first form we start with is maybe a time off request or an expense submission report, and calculations are a big part of those forms and a big part of a lot of your processes. So let's go into how we can do that. Each version of forms has made calculations a little bit easier. So the one we're going to show today is the most recent version, but there are other ways to do it if you're on a previous version of forms. All right, so here's the form that we're working with before and after. So this is an overtime form, and you can see what we are doing here in this form. We have a table with different columns where we're listing out the day of the week and the date, our start and end, and how many hours that was. And then what we want to do, we can add additional rows for each additional overtime request that we have. And then at the bottom, we want this total hours requested to be automatically tabulated. This will reduce mistakes as well as just make it easier for everyone involved. All right, so let's look at how we can do that. So in version 10.3 of Forms, they make it really easy to be able to click on the Advanced tab for that total field, and then just type in something similar to what you might see in Excel, which is a formula. So in this case, we put the screenshot in here so that you can just type this exactly as it is into your field and try it out. But basically what we're doing is we're summing, we're just saying equals sum, right? That's the same as Excel. And then we just put in the variable of what we would like to sum. So in this case, it's overtime requested on. And then what that looks like, oh, next step is if you wanted to take it a little bit further and you wanted to calculate based on the days of the week, you could add days of the week to your sum, and then you could get it to be a little bit more customized information in what you're reporting to the next person in the process. So your sum will look a little bit differently in this case. All right, so let's take a look at what it looks like now. So now we have our overtime estimate request form, and we've filled in our hours for each day, so 8 hours on each day, and then we've done the total automatically. So this has been calculated automatically. What a lot of people will do when they're doing sums as well is they'll make this field read-only to the end user so that they're not able to manually go in and change it. They would have to change what they're requesting in order to change the total. Another thing that's really nice about when you're trying to customize your forms is field rules. For anybody who hasn't used field rules before, this allows you to display or hide different fields in your form based on what's relevant to an end user. So if someone's filling out, in this case, this is back to our student accident form, if they're filling it out and they don't have insurance, then there's no reason for them to see the 5 or 6 fields that are required for somebody who needs to report their insurance details. So what we can do is hide those fields about the insurance details until someone indicates yes, that they do have insurance. This is something that we use in almost every form that we design now. This is one of the main benefits of using Laserfiche forms over paper forms, is the ability to hide irrelevant information and display and make required relevant information upon demand. So let's talk a little bit about how field rules work. So when you're in your Laserfiche form design pane, field rules are accessed in the second tab. And we'll zoom in a little bit to see how they work. So the way you set up a field rule is you will click the first drop-down, which is show or hide, and then you'll have a section or field here. And you can choose to save or not save the data when a field is hidden. If a field is hidden, say later on in the process of a forms process, you may want to save it even though it's hidden from, say, a particular reviewer. Maybe the first reviewer doesn't need to see insurance information. You might want to keep that and save the data. If not, you can just remove it entirely because you don't need those variables later in your process. So anyways, what we're doing now is we're showing insurance information when someone checks yes to is the dependent covered. So you say show, and then you choose your section or field. Then you say any or all, right? This is similar to a lot of our workflow configurations or any kind of condition editor that you might work with. So when any, if the dependent is covered by insurance, is or equal to, and then yes. And then we have a number of other ones here that are controlling other fields being displayed when other things are selected. So all of your field rules can help to display relevant information to your users when they're filling out the form based on what selections they've made previously. This is also a good way to control what information you collect. If you're an organization who has really long templates where some of the data is not collected all the time and some of it is, forms are a way that a lot of our firms are switching over to be able to collect relevant information, but maybe not have a list of a lot of fields right away. Just whichever is relevant to the document that they're scanning in, maybe use that form to collect that information instead. All right, so let's take a look at what that actually looks like in practice. So we're back to our student accident claim form, and we're on the insurance information tab. And then we have the option to click yes or no on whether someone's covered by insurance. When we click yes, then our insurance information fields pop up here. So we have the name of the policyholder and name of insurer, phone number, policy number, etc. All the normal things that you would typically collect when you get someone's insurance information. So again, this is our field before we made any selection. No fields right here. And then once we click yes, we get all of the relevant fields in the whole section. All right, another thing we like to talk about is what happens after someone submits a form. So part of the user experience is getting that reassurance after they've submitted a form that somebody's going to handle the next steps for them, or that if there's anything that we're expecting them to do after they submit a form, or maybe just telling them thank you in a particular way. Sometimes we might even want to redirect them to the next form in the process. If you're, say, building out an HR onboarding process, and after they fill out the first employee, confidentiality or non-compete, you want to direct them to the W-4, you can have that be a redirect. So redirect is something that happens once the form is completed. So let's take a look at what some of our options are. So in the process designer, you have the ability to, upon event completion, so this is on your start event in your form, so basically when the form is submitted, you have the ability to either customize the follow-up message. So this could be just thank you, your form has been submitted like the default is, or you could include in this follow-up message links to next steps or links to other maybe related forms. And you can customize this using this visual editor here, or you can click on the HTML tab so that you can click, or you can add clickable links or dynamic HTML language if you know how to do that. The other thing you can do that's just pretty simple and straightforward is you can just redirect to a particular website. So in our case, we just redirected back to our company's main website. But if they're filling out, say, a student insurance, student accident claim or injury claim, what they could be redirected to is a page with next steps and other information regarding how to handle being injured or resolve the issue. You can also, one thing that's really cool here is you can insert tokens. So if you want to have the ability to insert some kind of information that was collected on the form to the end of this URL to go to a dynamic address, you can certainly do that as well. That creates a really customized follow-up procedure for the next steps. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is CSS. For anybody who's not familiar with CSS, it stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it gives you a little more granular control over what your look and feel of your forms is. And so if you're familiar with web design, this is something that's used all the time in order to make your design consistent across multiple pages or across multiple sites even. So in Laserfiche, the CSS that we use in Laserfiche forms conforms to the CSS3 standards, so it should be pretty universal for anybody who's used to programming with or using CSS. And what we typically use this for is customizing a piece of the form that we want to apply, or customizing parts of the form that we want to apply to all the different pieces. So we want all the buttons to look a certain way, or we want all of the fields to look a certain way. If you're not familiar with CSS, the nice thing is that Laserfiche provides tons of resources that you can just copy and paste into your form in order to get it to work the way you want it to. So if you have something that isn't available, you don't see the options out of the box, but you really need to implement it, chances are that if you search the Laserfiche answer site, you will be able to grab a code snippet of the CSS that you're looking for. If you don't find it or you need extra help, you can always call one of our system architects and they can help you work out the details. So let's look at some of the options for CSS that are most popular. So one of them is if you want to put two fields next to each other on the same line. For those of you who have designed forms before, you know that out of the box you drag your field type into your form designer and it just goes in a line, top to bottom, no putting two fields on the same line. Unless you do a table, right? That's the only other option. But if you don't want to do a table, you just want the two fields to be side by side, the way you can do that is with CSS. So when you're in Forms, in your form designer, CSS is the last tab. It's CSS and JavaScript in the form designer. And here is the little code snippet for displaying two fields per line. And then right below, if you want this as well, is 3 fields per line. So what we're doing is we're just creating this little code here, and then we can just apply it to our fields over here, which will be what we had actually dragged onto our field designer in the layout tab. So you want to put all your fields on first in the layout tab. Then come here to CSS and JavaScript. CSS is at the top. You can just dictate this, type this exactly right here. And then what you can do is you can just come over to the right-hand side and input the information about which classes you want to apply to each field. So your fields will be listed with this little identifier, and then you just put in which class you want it to go to. So let's see what that looks like. A little bit closer. For those of you who are going to print out the slides and try this after this. And then what that turns out to look like is now you have fields listed side by side. So it goes just from the top to the bottom of how you put your fields onto your form and just puts 2 in each line instead of 1. It's really nice for making your fields to take up less room on a website. So if you don't want your form to be super long, but you know you have a number of different fields you need to collect, you can put them 2 per line. One thing that's important to note is that this is not as mobile friendly as just 1 per line. So that's something to consider if a lot of people will be using your forms from a mobile device. And so you can see we have our 2 per line, and then we have our table at the bottom if we're collecting, you know, quite a bit of different columns of information. So let's say you've added 2 per line, you've showed it to your audience or your intended users, and they're like, I don't know, I'm not sure if I like the 2 per line thing. Let's see it without that. If you don't want to take out all of your code that you've written in because they might change their mind after, what you can do is you can comment out your CSS to get a preview of it without the 2 per line. And so in order to do that, we're just going to add 2 slashes next to each line and a slash next to the top line. And that's going to comment out our changes so that it will appear as though we don't have any code in there, and it will just show us back to the default of 1 per line. But if they change their mind after, we can just go remove the slashes and it goes back. So here is what it looks like. So this is also the default if we had never made it 2 per line, but it's easy to switch it back to 2 per line if we want to remove the comments out. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about is hiding the submit button. So sometimes you might not want somebody to see the submit button either at all or maybe not until they've, say, signed a document. So hiding a submit button can be important if you're trying to control some of the details about when someone can submit a form. In addition, we've been implementing forms as a dashboard for a lot of our clients just because it's such an easy interface to customize. And if you are using forms as a dashboard, that just means you're using forms like a web page. So it includes maybe a lot of hyperlinks or some images or something that's important to your users, but they're not really going to use it to submit information. They're just using it as a place to view information. If that's the case, there's no reason for it to have a submit button, and it might even look funny if there's a submit button at the bottom of a form that's really just being used as a dashboard. This is a really easy CSS customization, so let's take a look at how to do it. So again, this is in the CSS and JavaScript tab, and this is the code that you would put in to hide the submit button. Just period submit, display none. And then you can see that corresponds to this field here at the very bottom, which is our submit button. So there we go. This is hidden. If we comment it out, so again, we put it in the slash before our command, then our submit button is shown, so you can see it there. So again, if we go back before it was commented, we can see there's no submit button. And if we comment it out, it's back. Okay, last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about JavaScript. So JavaScript is really where you can take your customization to the next level. It does require some coding, a little bit more than CSS, but again, it's something where there's a lot of examples that are out in the Laserfiche community that you can copy and paste into your form. But this is a really great tool because there are no limits to the amount of customization that you can do. So if you have a really specific behavior that you're looking for in your Laserfiche form, but it's not available out of the box and it's not available as one of the options, point and click, for one of your fields, this is a great way to get around some of the out of the box limitations, but still get the functionality that you need. So let's take a look at a couple of things we can do here. So one thing where we start is we apply a class to our field. So in this case, we're going to look at the field actual hours worked from our overtime form. And then when we click on the field, we'll get the properties pop up below just like normal. Instead of the basic tab, we're going to click on the advanced tab. And then we're going to go down to the CSS class or CSS class field and type in a name for the class. And then we're going to switch over. So that was in our layout tab. We're going to switch over to our CSS and JavaScript tab. At the bottom of that window, right before this, we were above in the CSS. And now we're in the JavaScript, which is at the bottom. So if we use this language here, what we can do is if there's no value in total hours worked, the submit button is going to be hidden because there's no reason someone should be submitting a request for overtime if the total is 0. So this is one of those moments where we can hide the submit button until a valid input is received. So what we're doing here is here's our class name that we had put into our fields properties in the last slide. And then we're also combining this with not displaying the submit button. So I'm going to just leave this in here as a slide. So if you wanted to just try to recreate this, you would be able to type it just from this slide into your form to try it out. You will be able to customize this by changing this class name to be whatever your class name is that you're trying, or whatever the class name is that you've put into your field properties of the one that you're trying to monitor. All right, so let's talk about if the actual work is empty, right? So it's set to none. So you can see in our preview that we're using for this particular field, if this is empty, the submit button is hidden. And those are our most common, most popular forms customizations. And so that's what we went through for today. I'm going to go through the resources a little bit here that we used and continually use whenever we're trying to customize Laserfiche forms, so that if you have any other things that you wanted to go see if there are examples of, you can check them out. And Laserfiche Answers, like I mentioned before, is one of our best resources for code snippets or ideas on how to customize forms. There's the Laserfiche Solution Exchange, if you want to see some examples of how other organizations have built forms that are similar to the ones you're trying to build or thinking about building. A lot of times they have the exact configurations that they use, which is really helpful. And then if you'd like to download the slides from this presentation or any of the content from any of our other webinars, you can always, of course, go to the City's Digital Client Portal. Shameless plug for our next webinar. Next month's consulting webinar, we're going to try a little different format. What we're going to do is a workflow and forms build along, which is we're going to go through a guided process of building out a very simple HR onboarding form. This will be a great webinar for anybody who's been looking to either build an HR form or workflow, or if you've been wanting to try out forms and workflow but haven't been wanting to do it without some help or somebody walking along with you. So what we're going to do is go through the actual configuration process, and if you'd like, you can follow along on your own system and get your questions answered in real time, so that at the end of the webinar, you'll have a basic forms workflow, forms process for HR onboarding, and a simple workflow to support that process. You'll be ready to deploy it. That's going to be September 13th on from 1 to 2 Central Time, and so hope we can see you there. And like usual at the end of these, what we're doing is please asking people to fill out the survey that will pop up after you leave this webinar. It's really important. We love getting your feedback on what you liked, what you didn't like, what you might like to see next time. So please do fill out the survey and get a chance to win this really great t-shirt. I'm a forms designer. I solve problems in ways you can't understand. And hopefully we'll get some good ideas for next time as well. So that is it for today. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to switch over to answer any questions that you submit. If you haven't already noticed it, in the GoToWebinar little panel that you have, there's an area for questions. You can definitely put your questions in there, and I'll go through them as they pop up. The first question is, if you use the back button or the previous button in Forms navigation, does it save the information? So let's see if I can go directly to that slide here. So if we go here to this navigation, so if you're using pagination in Forms and you're using this previous and next or back and forward button, it definitely will save the field information that you've typed in into the different pages of your form. Something that's really important to distinguish, though, is if you're in your Laserfiche, if you're in your actual web browser and you press the back button at the very top up by the address bar, you're actually going away from the Laserfiche form entirely. So if you use that back button, your information is not saved. So if you use the navigation that's included in the form, yes, the information is saved. If you use the back button in the browser, it's not saved because you're leaving the form entirely. The next question is about an interview process for candidate review for a new job. Let me see. Okay, so the question is, if you have multiple people inputting information into a form, and you want to be able to then take those multiple inputs and use a second form to come up with a calculation or average on that second form. So if you've been designing forms processes for a while, you know that some of your processes will have a single form, but some of them will have multiple forms. In this case, if you have multiple forms where you want to average, what you would do is you would take all of the inputs from the previous form onto your second form, and then you would add an additional field that will show the average. And then you can just use a calculation like average. Let's see if I can go back to my calculation here. But you would just go into the form form properties for that new field that you want to calculate the average in. And then you would type in equals, I think it's average or AVG, I'm not sure off the top of my head, as your formula for that new field. Sorry, trying to find, here we go. So you go to field options for average, which is on that, or yeah, maybe you would have your field name average on your second form, and then you would go to the advanced tab, and then you could choose a function, or if you knew what it was, you could just type it in. But if you choose the function, it will show you what all the common functions are. Average will be one of them. And then you might actually just need this more simple one where you average and then you just put in the field variable from all of the user inputs. The next question is, has there been any more discussion on adding a delegation piece for forms tasks, like when someone's out of the office? I know that this is one of Laserfiche's most common requests as far as forms goes, is the ability to set a user who's out of office and then have somebody else be there kind of monitoring their tasks or receiving their tasks while they're out of the office. To my knowledge, that is not in forms yet. I know that it's been something that's required or requested a lot, so hopefully Laserfiche is working on incorporating that into an upcoming release soon, but I haven't heard a date on the release for that. For those of you who do have that, you can always, as a manager, go in, if you have something like this come up, go in and reassign a task manually, which is not always ideal. Or you can use teams as an alternative in the meantime, where you assign a task to an entire team. And if somebody's primarily responsible, they go in and assign it to themselves right away. But if you notice that they're not there, or you know that you're supposed to be covering them, but you're part of the team, you still get notifications. So if you know you're responsible for those tasks while that person's out of the office, you go in to your team's tasks and assign all the ones for that day to yourself. Those are some of the workarounds that you can try in the meantime. All right, I don't see any other questions, so that is it for today. Hope we see you all next month as well, and have a great week. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.